Wallabies taking on Wales this weekend, folks. Game 2 of their 2-match series. Potential for the Wallabies to go 2-0 up, having won 25-16 last weekend. Wales could certainly just use a win. It's been a long time since we've seen a test match victory for the boys in red. The lineups have been named. We will go through them, some of the kind of ins and outs, some of the stats, the predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. But it was certainly, for the Aussies, a feel-good win last week, trying to put the nightmare that was the 2023 Rugby World Cup behind them. They've got Joe Schmidt in charge. He seems to have come to town with a kind of relatively straightforward game plan in the first instance to get the basics right, play some direct rugby, and then I guess kind of build some layers into their game over time. But we're only one game in, so we've only seen a kind of very limited amount. Now, unfortunately, the newly named captain, Liam Wright, the loose forward, he's out injured. So his tenure as initial captain of the Wallabies has only lasted the one game. James Slipper has been named captain for this second game, and he is certainly a heck of a veteran to have, and a guy who's going to, need no kind of talking to as to how to captain a Wallaby side. He has been there and done that. It is Slipper, Faessler, and Tupou in that front row. Second row is Williams and Salakaia-Loto, and the back row is Valetini, McReight, and Cale. So there's kind of minimal changes, but with those injuries, we do have the changes. I mean, the armband being on Slipper's shoulder for this one, that's one change. But then, like, these key guys who were part of that direct game plan last week are still there. I mean, Matty Faessler, 10 carries. Rob Valetini, 10 carries. Salakaia-Loto, 11 carries. These guys were just trying to get that kind of one-off runner, truck the ball up, get over the advantage line. If we get stuck, Jake Gordon can boot the heck out of it. Potentially a bit more of the same. When you combine that with the fact that the scrum power of Taniela Tupou was bossing the Welsh in the first half, and the fact that their line-out was able to disrupt what the Welsh were doing, that's the kind of foundation of where that victory was built on, with a bit of X-factor from some of their key guys in the back line. But that's the forward pack. The only changes in terms of positions, Valetini switches to 6. Charlie Cale, who was impressive up from the bench, is going to get a start. And as I mentioned, James Slipper as captain. So all in all, pretty stable in the front row. Backs-wise, Jake Gordon and Lolesio continue on at 9-10. And I do think Joe Schmidt likes the kicking game of Jake Gordon, that bit of distance he gets on the ball aerially. Plus, we know he's got that kind of sniping game in him. If he gets that opportunity, he'll certainly take it. We've seen that from the Tars time with him this year. Midfield of Paisami and Flook continues on. And Paisami was also called upon for some of those tackle-breaking runs it has as well. He beat 3 defenders, which was among the top of the guys in the game last week. And then the outside backs, I mentioned there's a bit of X-factor. Filipo Daugunu scored one of the Wallabies' tries. Kellaway didn't score a try, but he came bloody close on the right wing with that kick from Lolesio. And then Tom Wright, coughed up a little bit of ball. He had more turnovers conceded than any Wallaby last week with 3. But with that try, that's all that's going to be remembered from last week. No one's going to remember the drop ball. People are only going to remember that try from the backfield, just cutting through the Welsh defence like a hot knife through butter. Certainly a big bit of X-factor that got the Wallabies over the line. Bench-wise, Josh Nasser's going to get his debut when he comes off the bench, so big congratulations to him as the replacement hooker. Kailea and Alaalatoa continue on as the prop replacements, and there's talk that when Alaalatoa comes on, he will take over the captaincy if Slipper gets substituted at the same time. Blyth is there. He got his debut last week and looked pretty solid in that big second row. Gleeson is going to step in as the loose forward replacement to replace Cale, who's since replaced Wright in the back row. Nick White, interestingly, also gets the nod ahead of Tate McDermott. I didn't read if McDermott's injured, but we know Nick White has also got a pretty decent box kicking game on him if Joe Schmidt's looking to kind of add a bit more boot to ball. The Wallabies, I think, kicked, I forget how many times more, but they certainly kicked a bit more than the Welsh last week. Admittedly, they did have more ball. And also Ben Donaldson and Dylan Pietsch are the other back replacements. So Ben Donaldson gets the nod ahead of Liner. For the Welsh, they have also got some injuries. I mean, Aaron Wainwright having that hamstring injury is certainly the most devastating news, because in terms of Welsh performances last week, he was their standout player. Led the way for run meters and tackle busts and whatnot. He was just really high energy in a team that, only scored the 1 try. So his absence is certainly going to be felt. But for the forward pack, Thomas, Lake and Griffin, they continue on in the front row. There was a little bit of doubt about Gareth Thomas Reports of him having a dead leg throughout the week, so he might be kind of penciled in for now. We'll see if there's any late changes with him. He did concede 3 penalties up against Tupou in that first half, so he'll be certainly looking to scrum better, to put it simply. They can't be conceding those kind of penalties that they did against the Tonga Thor last week. Chiunza and Jenkins, boy did they make some tackles last week. Chiunza had 22, Jenkins had 20. Reffel had a bunch as well, but the second row, the engine room for the Welsh, were getting through that defensive shift. They'll be looking to secure some more line-out ball alongside the other forwards, but that was certainly one of the kind of key work-ons you would think from last week. James Botham's up from the bench to start at number 6 this week because Tane Plumtree shifts to cover the absence in Wainwright's number 8 jersey, and then Tommy Reffel continues on at number 7. He certainly got through some tackles, but I guess would like to also make his presence felt a little bit more at the breakdown, because the Aussie breakdown was largely pretty secure. For the backs, Alice Bevan and Ben Thomas are the two guys continue to be trusted with the 9 and 10 jerseys for Wales. I thought they were solid last week. Ben Thomas looked comfortable for a guy who doesn't play a heck of a lot of 10. Mason Grady and Owen Watkin likewise continue to build their partnership in the midfield. Mason Grady chalked up 3 of the defenders beaten for Wales last week. The kind of X factor in terms of breaking tackles has been an area that Wales has struggled with in 2024, but I mean, they had 15 defenders beaten last week, and Mason Grady had 3 of them, so he's kind of right up there. Liam Williams shifts to the right wing this week with Cam Winnett coming in at 15, and Rio Dyer on the left wing. So Dyer continues in his spot. Josh Hathaway had a bump on his arm, so he was ineligible for this week, I believe. And Cam Winnett played fullback in the Six Nations, so he returns to that number 15 jumper for Wales. And this one, bench-wise, Evan Lloyd, Kelmsey Mathias, and Harry O'Connor. Same front row replacements as last week. And remember, the second half for Wales' scrum shift actually did a lot better, but that may be more to do with the fact that Taniela Tupou went off for the Wallabies at halftime. Corey Hill continues on, and Mackenzie Martin, the big youngster, will be looking to make some impact from the bench as he comes into the 23, and the same back replacements with Hardy, Costello, and Tompkins. But yeah, Wainwright and Hathaway certainly the guys who have missed out on this one through injury. Stats-wise, like I mentioned, the Aussie lineout was solid. They only lost 1 of their lineouts last week. That's a key fundamental for Joe Schmidt. The scrum was solid and bossing the thing in the first half. That's a solid kind of foundation for Joe Schmidt. And then Gordon's box kicks, getting that height along with the direct carry, that is the foundation I think is there for this Wallabies side. And defensively, unlike the kind of Eddie Jones days, tackling at 90%. Now, defending against this Welsh side, with all due respect, is at the moment kind of a different kettle of fish from potentially playing the likes of an All Blacks or a Springboks side or an Ireland side. But yeah, certainly from a Wallabies point of view, whoever you're playing, if you're tackling at 90%, that is a solid outing. The goal kicking, they'd obviously like to be a bit higher. They missed a penalty. They missed a conversion. But overall, the kind of foundational stuff went well, and the work rate from the guys was good. That being said, for Wales, they also tackled at 90%. It was a couple of pretty nice tries that beat them. The Tom Wright one, they won't like the look of when they look back at it, but it was a proper bit of skill. And the Welsh maul, you'd have to say, was certainly the most threatening looking weapon that they had in that game. They potentially could have had 2 more tries, although one of them was chalked off for a bit of obstruction. I saw Nigel Owens go through some of the refereeing decisions at the weekend, and he disagrees with Gats, and he reckons that one was a pretty kind of clear-cut penalty from the Welsh. But certainly the maul, if they can get close range on the Wallabies and they can win their line-out, could be key, because the line-out was bad last week, and as I mentioned, the scrum in the first half was under pressure. Combine that with the fact that they conceded 19 turnovers, like just so much cough ball. Surely they won't do that 2 weeks in a row. Reduce the error rate if the scrum can hold up and the line-out is improved. I think this Welsh performance gets a lot better, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. Of the last 5 games, we are at 3 Welsh wins to 2 Australian wins. Remember, it was 25-16 last week, which is certainly the most relevant one. That kind of game back at the World Cup, which was 40 points to 6 to Wales, certainly feels like ancient history. That was a much changed Wallabies lineup from this lineup that played last week. The predictions-wise, the bookies are saying the Wallabies by 11. which is a pretty similar scoreline to last week. And the Rugby Forecast algorithm is a little bit more conservative, saying the Wallabies by 7. It is on at AME Park in Melbourne, which is an interesting one because remember, Melbourne is the team that has just lost their Super Rugby franchise. So we'll see what the turnout is like there. I haven't read if it's sold out or not, but it was certainly sold out in front of an impressive crowd last week in Sydney. Nika Amashukeli, the Georgian, is the ref. With the All Blacks game he controlled last week against England, he only blew for 17 penalties, which is kind of on the low side. The Aussie-Welsh game last week certainly had a few more than that. It was kind of 20 plus. But there were no cards, and the TMO interventions were minimal for the Georgians game last week. So fingers crossed it is something similar between the Aussies and the Welsh. You guys let us know your thoughts on how this one is going to go. If you want to watch this or many of the other kind of July internationals and you're in the States, check out Flow Rugby. That's down in the description. They've also got replays of the games from last week in case you missed out on any of them. But you guys let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. I would appreciate it. And I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.